What's up guys, Asian here again with a PTS video, and this time we're going to be taking a look at the Magicka Templar, looking at whether Puncturing Sweep is going to make a comeback as a potential spammable. So what sort of brought around this change was the fact that Puncturing Sweep and Biting Jabs no longer scale off of Thaumaturge. So they used to scale off of Thaumaturge. They were actually quite a bit of a weird ability here where they scaled off of, I believe it was both Mastered Arms and Thaumaturge, with the majority of it being from Thaumaturge. I believe it was the initial strike skill of Mastered Arms, but the following strike skill of Thaumaturge, or something weird like that. So it was never really that great of a spammable. In terms of raw damage that is dealt, it actually is fairly decent. However, Puncturing Sweeps and Biting Jabs both have a disadvantage in the fact that it is considered a channeled ability. You can see here it has a 1-second channel, compared to something like Elemental Weapon, which is an instant cast. Now, you would normally think that a 1-second channel doesn't affect things too much, but it does actually lower the amount of light attack that you're able to get off over a same period of time. And so because of that, Puncturing Sweeps has never really been much of a spammable. Once, probably around Morrowind or so, probably a little bit later than Morrowind. At that point, dual-wield magplars were still kind of a thing, and while dual-wield magplars, you could still potentially use them now, you don't really see them being used all too often here. So with the changes to Puncturing Sweeps, along with the fact that there were a lot of sort of damage changes, the total amount of damage changes didn't really impact Puncturing Sweep in terms of a dot, it is worth sort of reconsidering whether or not it'd be worth running this as a Magicka Templar. The quick and dirty answer is no, it is not. I did do a few parses here just to kind of get a sense of how elemental weapons stacked up against the Puncturing Sweeps in a pretty much identical build. So it was your typical Magicka Templar build, so 64 points into Magicka, Dark Elf, Shadow Mundus, running Parse Food, and then in terms of gear, it was just the same old Zahn with Mother Sorrow and Sororia. I did use 3 Arcane, didn't want to transmute them, so all parses were done with Arcane though, so don't worry the fact that it's not Bloodthirsty. Then infused Flame Damage enchant, and infused Absorb Magicka enchant on the back bar here with the Maelstrom's Inferno. In terms of parses, so the first parse here that you're going to see is going to be with Elemental Weapon here, and one thing I do want to point out is the amount of light attacks that we have. So we have 236 light attacks with 83 Elemental Weapons. We pulled 72.2k. Now if we go over to 2 of these parses with Puncturing Sweeps, we have 68.8k, and another one which is 69k, 69.1k. You can see our light attacks 212 here on the first parse and 214 on the second parse. And we do have a longer in combat time, so 5 minutes 5 seconds compared to 4 minutes 50 seconds, and we're still getting more light attacks off. So that directly translates into the number of fiery weapon enchants that we're getting off. So we see 93 here with Elemental Weapon compared to 56. I believe this was with a precise front bar, and this was with the infused front bar here, so 81. So we're losing out on about 12 fiery weapons, so that's the flame damage enchant here. And in terms of burning light procs, well, the advantage of running Puncturing Sweeps is that you get more burning light procs, so 106 compared to 80. But in terms of overall DPS, again, you're making a bit of sacrifices here. You're not doing as many light attacks, you're not doing as many fiery weapon glyphs here. And so your burning uptime is also going to be lower because you're not going to have as much fiery weapon uptime here. So if we look at burning, 70% here with 173 ticks from burning, compared to 61 on burning, and 141 ticks here. So we are losing some ticks of burning here, and now part of this is due to the fact that Elemental Weapon does have a chance of applying burning. So that does sort of offset a little bit that disparity there. So overall, doesn't really seem like you could use Puncturing Sweeps as a spammable if you're looking for raw damage. Now, one of the advantages of running Puncturing Sweeps, though, is the fact that if we get rid of all of this, and we take a look at our Magicka percentage over the course of the parse, you can see that Puncturing Sweeps, this is the Elemental Weapon parse, sorry, we have quite a bit of a sustain issue here. Once we hit around 2 minutes in or so, we started getting a little bit low on Magicka here, compared to our Puncturing Sweeps parse where we never really ran out of Magicka. So it's kind of that trade-off that you're trying to make here. So you're looking at about a 3k or so differential in DPS, 3 to 4k differential, but the exchange here is this parse is far harder to sustain compared to a Puncturing Sweep parse. So here I didn't have to do any sort of heavy attacks. Over here though, I did have to do 2 heavy attacks in order to fully sustain the rotation here. That's kind of the trade-off that you're making here, but generally speaking, I probably would still stick with Elemental Weapon or Force Blows as a magplar spammable instead of Puncturing Sweeps. That's mainly just because sustain, with how much DPS is being pulled right now, sustain is not really that big of an issue. Not many boss fights are going to last this 5 minutes, unless you're doing something like a mini trial, not Sanctum, Cloudrest, or Asylum. At that point, yes, it might be worth using Puncturing Sweeps, but then you also have to take into consideration you're playing within melee range rather than at ranged, which is kind of the advantage of running a magicka DPS in those 2 trials. So at that point, is it really worth sacrificing your mobility in order to gain that sustain, rather than just using a heavy attack here and there? And usually the answer is no. You kind of, if the fights aren't taking 5 minutes, only the really high-end guilds are taking 5-6 minute long mini trials here, you probably don't want to be within melee range because that just ends up killing you more often. So the long story short, don't bother using Puncturing Sweeps, even though it might seem like a pretty decent spammable compared to other spammables right now, just because they did change how it scales and wasn't affected by any sort of dot changes. Elemental Weapon and Force Pulse are still going to be the stronger options here, mainly because they're instant cast, you get more light attacks off, which directly relates to more enchant procs, which directly relates, if you're using a fire damage enchant, to more burning uptime, which does end up increasing your overall damage. So definitely want to stick with Elemental Weapon and not Puncturing Sweep as a spammable. That concludes this video. Very short, very sweet, to the point. It's been a while since I've taken a look at Puncturing Sweeps, so it is somewhat refreshing and to know that it is still not the best spammable, but it is still closing the gap a little bit here. It used to be quite a bit different from what I recall from my tests when I was making builds a year and a half ago. So it has closed the gap a little bit here, but it's still not really worth running except in very specific scenarios where you might want some more cleave running sweeps compared to just a single target of Elemental Weapon. Well, that's it for this video. Hope you guys found this informative, and I will see you guys in the next dungeon.